Happy birthday.
Huh? What? Thanks. You're a little late.
Yeah, I'm very late. No, well, actually, I am a little late for this one, too.
Yeah.
We passed 52 episodes, which means we've been doing this thing for a year.
Hell yeah. 1 year of communism piped into your ears.
Yeah. Feels pretty good, I gotta say.
It's, I don't know. I'm not always the best at following through on things, so.
Yeah, me either.
Pretty impressive, in my opinion, based on my own expectations of myself.
Honestly, me too, just because I have a lot of other stuff going on, and, Geminis like to start a lot of different projects, so, yeah, it's been very hard being like, no, I can't, learn a 3D program right now, I already have enough going on, but it's cool.
If you are just tuning in for the first time...
Good news, there's a lot of content for you.
Yeah, you have 52 episodes to go back and enjoy. We try to keep we don't do a lot of...
Inside jokes.
Yeah, well, inside jokes, but we have a few that are paired, part one, part two. And we have maybe a couple that sometimes we'll reference things that are current events. But they're pretty good at going
Evergreen.
back and listen to them. Yeah, there you go, evergreen.
Yeah, you've clearly never worked in marketing.
No.
That's a good
Nope.
thing. Oh, wait, have you heard of Thumb Stopper? I think I told you this one already.
Oh. Thumb Stopper, is that it's like you're scrolling?
It's
Wow,
not the worst.
okay. So it's like eye-catching, but Thumb Stopper.
Yeah, it's really bad. I hate it.
It's funny. It's the same principle. I mean, it's still catching your eye. That's why your thumb stopped it.
Yeah.
It's not textured differently.
It grows. Speaking of media, we've got a lot of that to cover.
Yes, we did a communist movie night. We eschewed our usual light fare or entertainment-based fare in general. I mean, I feel like we got into some meaty ones with Judas and the Black Messiah. That was
That's true.
historical content,
Yeah, I didn't realize this was our first documentary. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, wild.
Took us a year.
But here we are going to be talking about the documentary film from 1992 called Manufacturing Consent.
This is available on YouTube if you just want to Google it. It's kind of long. For some reason, I thought it was not long. And I was like, oh shit, this is 3 hours long.
Yeah, it is pretty long. It's by Mark Akbar and Peter Wintonic.
You're Canadian, right?
Yes, yeah. And, enough of the film was done in Canada to get Film Board of Canada in the credits and stuff. So they got whatever Canadian public money helps out people doing stuff in Canada. This is in 1992. It's based on the 1988 book of the same name by Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman, and its focus is the kind of life and ideas of Noam Chomsky. All right, so let's get into it.
Who's this Noam guy?
Noam Chomsky, professor. The film, I think, kind of does a pretty good job of doing a kind of summary of his bio, his kind of life's work / history sort of thing through these little interspersed biographical kind of sections. Noam Chomsky was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Cool.
Back during the Depression, the Great Depression in the United States. And he talks about in the film kind of how his background and stuff going to this progressive school, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Where he's like, yeah, man, there was no competition. They didn't, they weren't oh, these are the good students, these are the bad students. He had no idea he was a good student till he goes to the normal high school. I thought that was cool.
I love that.
I was like, I would like to teach there and have kids go to school there. It was described as this very free and open sort of arrangement.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Also, I didn't realize he was this old. I was like, damn,
the dude is old. Yeah, he looks like Santa Claus now.
Yeah.
He's got a full-on beard.
In this documentary, he looks a lot like Bush 1. Kyle and I were watching it together, and we kept being like, is that? No, it's him again.
He does.
Super old, went through a depression, which means also World War II and Vietnam. I'm like, damn, dude, you must be tired.
And he talks about how he was this dude was writing about opposing fascism when he was like 12.
I know.
Writing about the Spanish Civil War. There's, again, there it rears its head.
I know. That's like our guest on this podcast every week is the Spanish Civil War, accidentally.
Yep. He talks about kind of his radicalization story, how he, growing up, would visit relatives, including this uncle with this kind of like anarchist newsstand situation, who's running this like working class political salon, this newsstand in the street near the subway in New York. And it just sounds super cool. Like, I would love to go to this place.
Yeah.
And first of all, he describes his uncle as a badass with a background in crime and also getting into left-wing politics. I'm like, yeah, I would love to talk to
this
that
guy
dude
sounds
about
amazing.
anything. And plus, like, this newsstand idea just sounds great. It would be better maybe if, like, paired with, like, a food truck kind of combo.
I like that. Yeah, some
Like-
benches, too. I need to sit.
So, yeah, I can go get some tacos and hang out and discuss communism and anarchism and stuff with people.
Sounds ideal. Let's open a newsstand.
This is a terrible business
No,
venture, but it
yeah.
does sound cool.
We'll make negative money.
What else do they talk about his life? They, then they kind of get into his academic career.
Yeah, this guy wrote like a fuck ton of books. Like they showed a stack at one point. I don't know if that was even all of it. I was like, holy shit.
So the crazy thing is that this guy like did a ton of work and does, continue to do work in linguistics. Like this is a primary field, but he also does all these, has done all these books and again continues to produce work in the realm of politics, particularly foreign policy, but also studies of the media, which is what manufacturing consent is.
I'm looking up his birth chart.
It's so much that he's very prolific in that way.
Ooh, a Sagittarius. Okay.
What does that mean?
I only know one Sagittarius, so I don't have enough info.
Is it Noam Chomsky?
Yeah, that's him. Interesting.
His selected bibliography. So he has a big enough bibliography to have a selected bibliography.
That is
Which means
pretty
you've
big.
written a ton. It's 3 columns on Wikipedia, just the selected stuff.
He's got a lot of Gemini in his charts too. Just it's not like one of his major ones, but like it makes sense. Okay, sorry.
Why does it make sense?
Because Geminis are into lots of different things.
Okay.
We can't like stay focused. We can't.
All right.
Anyway. I was reading the stars of the stars.
There you go. That's why listeners really tune in.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
We should start doing that with all of our historical figures. Just like, what was Che Guevara's chart? We got to know.
That's what we should open with next time is when everyone we've gone back to do a brief star analysis.
We should.
And then going forward, we just incorporate that.
I love this. I love it.
All right.
Back to Noam.
Back to Noam. His career focused initially on linguistics. That's what he, did his PhD on. And his whole thing to start out with was something called universal grammar.
Okay, so is this what they were talking about where they're like language is genetic or something? Not like you're born and you know Spanish, but like you're predisposed to pick up language very easily. Is that what they're saying?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. That was his theory and continues to be his theory with some modifications. This kind of tore apart or caused a big fight, in the linguistics field called the linguistics wars.
Ooh, gosh, starting shit everywhere.
Yeah, some of his, I don't know if they're former students or what, but they, everyone started arguing about whether he was right or not. And I guess overall as a field, linguistics has kind of said, we're not so sure if there's a lot of proof for universal grammar. They've kind of, moved on, or there's, the majority camp is not on his side anymore.
I guess I'm wondering how, this isn't a linguistic sidebar here, but
yeah, for sure.
how basic does that go? Is it we all have nouns? Is that good enough, or does it have to be more specific?
He's saying that there's a grammar, a skeleton to put specific words and stuff in.
Okay.
But we have wired into our brain because of a genetic mutation, we have a framework for building any language into that. So once we learn the rules, we can intuitively kind of put that together.
That's cool.
That's what he was talking to. He was on a Japanese show of some sort saying like, yeah, if you take a kid from Boston and raise him in Japan, he's going to speak Japanese, vice versa. We're really good. And this is, this part is true that we're like, and kind of proven that like pretty much the most complex thing your brain ever does is acquire its first language.
For sure.
Like you're just a language sponge.
Yeah. Like imagine if we were as spongy, like going forward, that's the true Limitless movie. This baby brain. And
so, apparently there's a lot of controversy in this. I don't want to get too into the weeds because I did do too much reading on that for just no reason because it's interesting. But that's what he was mainly about. They kind of ask him like, okay, so, well, you do all this linguistic stuff and like, kind of what's the link? Like, how does linguistics basically prove or link up with your political views? And he's just like, I guess it doesn't. I
love that. I love these like, I can be into two things. Don't fucking pigeonhole me.
Right. Yeah. He's not, trying to prove, and I guess we can get into this now, what his political views were. He's not trying to prove those through his academic research into linguistics or anything, or vice versa. But yeah, let's get into his political activism.
Yeah.
He was this professor, and the Vietnam War started kicking off, and he's just pretty much safely ensconced in academia. He's too old to be drafted anywhere. And even so, he sees this bullshit going on and he's like, I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to say something about it, do whatever I can do in my capacity as someone who people think people should hear from. And like, starts taking a public stand and leading anti-war demonstrations and stuff like that.
I really loved how he phrases that. Like he was just like, I'm very comfortable. Like I don't have to do this. Like it was a real decision. It was a real choice. And like, I relate to that super hard. Like it is so easy just to be caught up in comfort and just be like, yeah, I've got a job now. I've got a house now. Like everything's fine. Like I personally don't have to worry about the world. But like, it does feel like a choice you make nearly every day of like, okay, I got to keep giving a shit. And it's exhausting.
I hear you. And I think that it is, difficult to do something. I would say that we
we don't do anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you might be doing more on the side. I don't really know.
No. I think for me, it's a lot of emotional energy. Like, my therapist says I'm very empathetic. And I take on a lot of other people's shit, I'm just like, I'm really sad right now because of, like, COVID and stuff like that. So like,
even, like, tuning in, paying attention is still kind of, like, work.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. I mean, hell, there's a lot of people that don't even do that. So, I mean, sure.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of this movie is about, which is interesting. But, like, he definitely, like, made that conscious choice to be like, nah, I'm going to go do shit. And I'm like, man, I probably should do shit.
Yeah, I just don't want to be, like, weird.
No.
I guess he's kind of doing the old school version of podcasting is going around giving speeches. But he was also doing, like, actual research and work and stuff, so.
Yeah, no, I guess I just mean that, like, it is kind of like a conscious choice to be like, I'm going to start seeing the world differently. And even that is a big leap. And sometimes it's very tempting just to be like, maybe I should just fucking tune out and just be a person again. Yeah.
Maybe I should just see the world the way so many people see the world because it's fucking easy to do that.
It's way easier.
You're not pissed. You're not sad. You're not like, everything's fucked. Like,
you're not constantly thinking about the heat death of the planet. Like, that'd be cool. That kind of gets into the main thesis, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of does. To wrap up kind of the biography part, he gets involved and, starts kind of becoming this, what he calls a public intellectual, sort of is just more of a political activist. He ends up being on Nixon's enemy list.
Love it. Good man.
Because he's, cool.
Yeah, that's how
everyone on there is cool. And yeah, I mean, he's still like at University of Arizona, kind of part-time. He's very old, like you said.
Yeah, dude.
But I mean, that was his main like line of work the whole time, was still being a professor.
Yeah.
And still doing political activism.
The setup of this documentary, like probably 50% of it is him being interviewed by various media outlets.
Yeah.
Or him giving speeches and talks. And they keep using this phrase over and over again, like he's one of the most preeminent intellectuals of our time. And I love that he's like, yeah, the back half of that quote says my book sucks, which is fucking great.
Yes. Yeah.
But do we even have public intellectuals now? Like, I would never turn on the TV and see like some nerd ass professor talking. Like, I thought that was so interesting. Like, this is just Twitter now. Like, right?
Right. Yeah. You somewhat still have that with like maybe columnists or
Ta-Nehisi Coates or something.
Right. Or in a kind of neoliberal economic sense, you have Paul Krugman. Mm-hmm. You have, who are some other examples of that?
I mean, Roxane Gay, that's more of a cultural one, but.
And yeah, there's kind of more nowadays, more is like popularizers. Like if you think like a science popularizer like Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not intellectual, really.
That's so interesting to me. I was just thinking about that because, like, I mean, this whole thing is about how the media is changing and like we'll get to this point later, but just the fact that to me at least I couldn't think of a modern day intellectual, and this documentary is talking about how like the points we have to make are really concise now because we're just trying to get people's attention, and I'm just like yeah, that happened.
Well, yeah, and now it's gotten so bad, it's evolved so much past that like now you just say, okay, here's a speechwriter for one side, here's a former aide to the other side, yell at each other, like cable news. And cable news is bullshit, but like on, social media or whatever, here's a meme, here's a post, here's somebody getting slammed. Like, you don't even have that.
No, and like I've taken like marketing, not classes, but like, I don't know, seminars or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real trip. But
Sounds
like
lovely.
The rules for like how long you want someone to be on your content are just getting shorter and shorter. You're like, yeah, you want to stay there for like 5 seconds. And you're like, what the fuck can I say in 5 seconds? Like, it really is just like you take in so much content every day that people are just trying to get you to look at it for a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think there's somewhat of a shotgun approach to that, though. Like, that is, the epitome of like, let's, throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. Like,
yeah, let's pump it.
Because you're just trying to get like anyone, Whereas we operate in kind of a more niche area where we're trying to find people who want to devote an hour and a half or more to listening to something. It's definitely a different medium. We're lucky to be spared that.
Yeah.
So let's get into the main thesis then.
Cool.
Would you like to kind of intro that? Or
yeah, I can summarize for the class.
Okay.
So he basically thinks that the media, in conjunction with other capitalist forces, namely like corporations who own them and like internalizing imperialist values of the United States, is setting up what he calls thought control, which is a really fucking cool sci-fi term. Love it. Should be a song by like one of those like kind of new age 90s bands or something. Yeah,
to me it sounds kind of like a Daft Punk song.
That would be good too. So yeah, he claims, his thesis is that, yeah, there's this whole system of media and it's really there to like distract the public and keep them happy so that they can keep working.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. I also thought the terminology of thought control was an interesting one, and it's provocative deliberately. Like in one of the scenes, he's talking on the radio show in Laramie, Wyoming. I mean, this seemed like a good radio show, so like maybe we have to reevaluate our... No listener has tuned in yet, right? And said like, actually, Wyoming is good.
I don't remember. I don't think so. We have an Iowa guy, but I don't know if we have a Wyoming guy
Iowa's
yet.
good now.
Iowa's good.
But Wyoming, we may have to revise. This was a pretty good radio show, so if it's still around.
I know, right?
But she was like, because at one point she says like, oh, it's fine. We went over, but that means less sports, and that's fine with me.
I didn't catch that. That's fantastic.
But anyway, she says like, well, say you're Jane USA.
Oh, I love that.
I'm like, I don't, I make my own choices. Like, I'm free to make up my own mind. I'm not subject to thought control. Like, I don't get it. What do you mean? And I think that's a wonderful way to get people thinking like, hold on a second, Mac, thought control. Like, not me. I'm smart. And then it's like, well, you are. You're totally smart. But there are people trying to deceive you every single minute of your life, or every time you tune into something on the TV, on the radio, on your phone, whatever, someone's always trying to sell you something. Or someone's always trying to bamboozle you some way. And that's what we mean.
It's not that we're calling people stupid or something. It is just that, like, you're not being told all the information, and there's a reason for that.
Yes, yeah.
And what was interesting is, in the documentary, they do a lot of, like, on-the-street interviews with people, and they're like, do you think the media is biased? And pretty much everyone is like, yeah, duh. Like, they asked this, like, group of, like, I think they're, like, teenagers, maybe. They look like young guys, like, in front of the White House. Like, do you think they tell you everything that goes on? And they're like, fuck no. Like, there's no way.
But yeah, like, people, and he makes a good point of this, and I think this is a strength of his, when people call him out. And I think there was an interview with Bill Moyers on there where he's like, well, come on, it's a little bit like, you're an MIT guy, you're like this professor, and like, you're over here talking about the common man and stuff. And he's just like, yeah, like, common people are fucking intelligent.
Yeah.
And stuff. And he's not saying anything out of like, oh, you know, we got to fix this so that morons like aren't fooled.
Like Jane
He's
USA.
saying like, you can figure this stuff out if you are insane and devote all of your time to it.
Yeah, yeah.
But most people don't have that. And so we need to, like, you know, this can't be, this will fool so many people because we just don't have the time or energy to devote, so, you know, time to like sleuthing out the details.
I'm making a little connection here. I know he didn't want to, but between linguistics and this, because the idea of language as like a constantly evolving thing, like, I think we grew up kind of with the notion of like, no, there are grammar rules, you got to fucking do them. But like, if you listen to modern programs on stuff like that now, they're like, no, like slang is valid, basically.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's so interesting that, like, yeah, you're right. We grew up more of a prescriptive grammar model, which is, this is how things are. Don't say ain't, you know, that sort of thing. Or don't end in a preposition.
Yeah.
And what's not in vogue, but what is more, like, accepted now in the linguistic community is, you know, descriptive grammar. How do people actually talk?
Yeah, yeah. It's all about dialects and shit. So, like, I don't know. I think there's kind of a thread there with, like, the common people thing of, like, no, they're not stupid. Just, like, we just want to make things better.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so back to the kind of central thesis of the media's kind of concerted attempt at thought control. It's kind of an interesting conspiracy theory because it's like, it's not really a conspiracy. It's just like, it's people with the same interests.
Yeah, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay. This drove me crazy during the documentary. You constantly have these people.
The Times guy and
the Times guy sucked so hard. Also, his desk was so messy, it made me anxious just watching it. I was like, no. That's not okay. It was really frustrating. They had these people constantly defending the media, being like, it's not like it's like a cabal of like people in a room twirling mustaches. I'm like, it doesn't have to be. Like, it's
right.
And he makes the point later, like, it's internalized values. Like, you grew up in this American loving system, this capitalist system, like, you are going to defend it because that's what you know and that's what you've been taught is correct. It's not like you have your evil friends on speed dial. It's just like you all share the same values. Yes,
yeah, and that's something that we've seen before. And where we're, you know, Marx and Engels and stuff, they were like, yeah, capitalists are doing this and they don't have to be individually evil. They don't have to be in a, you know, smoke-filled room saying, today we do imperialism, you know? Like,
yeah.
But they just do it out of self-interest. That it just, you know, knocks them in that direction, pulls them inexorably toward these, you know, effective cabals, if not actual ones, you know?
It's about the impact versus intent. And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter that they're not scheming. They're still doing fucked up shit.
All right. So from Thought Control, he kind of starts talking about the standard view of the media in a democratic society. Right? Because everyone's rightfully like, come on, man, we're not being thought controlled here. Like, we're in a democratic society, you know, the press is there to help people figure out what's going on, and, as he puts it, assert meaningful control over the democratic political process, right?
Yeah. Like, you talk to people, they're like, oh, we have freedom of press, we have freedom of speech, like, we're free.
Yeah. And the campaign by a lot of kind of liberal minds is oh, we need a brave press that will challenge, and tell the truth, and we need objectivity and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
Because they are kind of subscribed to that standard view of this is the media's job. But Chomsky kind of says there's this contrary view of the media as kind of an indoctrination tool. And he kind of roots it in this, he roots it really far back, actually, in the English Civil Wars.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Documentary. I thought that was kind of interesting how, because the English Civil Wars are traditionally just kind of, they're just factions. It's Parliament versus the Royalists.
Yeah.
And
you think of it as just like, I don't know, kings and shit. Like it was an old-timey rich people war.
Right. And there's elements to that because there's this kind of bourgeois element of the Parliament and stuff versus the kind of more traditional or conservative element of the Royalists. But you also had within that, and he kind of mentions this, these popular movements who were questioning authority, questioning hierarchy, like kind of anti both sides.
Yeah.
Like, why can't we just fucking do things? Like, we're cool, And I like the quote that he had from one of them that was like, they have made the people thereby so curious and so arrogant that they will never find humility enough to submit to a civil rule.
Oh, that is just perfectly encapsulates the goals and fears of capitalism.
Right? Yeah, let's do that. Let's make people not submit to civil rule. But yeah, this contrary view kind of sees democracy as a game for elites to be playing. The masses should not really be directly involved in this. Yeah.
And like they go on to say, you see this all over the place in the United States founding fathers history. Like that's pretty well known.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe lesser known, this figure, Walter Lippmann, that he mentions, the one that the title manufacturing consent comes from.
Oh, yeah.
Where he was saying it unironically and as a good thing. Basically, his idea was that people are, too stupid to be doing democracy. They have to have the intelligent, specialized class of people to tell them what's good for them.
Yeah. And is this where they talk about like the societal goals? Like you got to have everyone on the same page, basically.
Yeah. You have to have this enlightened class of people to kind of guide people toward what's good for them in their common interest. Yeah. And
he kind of gets into like why you need this. Like that's definitely one part, but he talks about how in a totalitarian system, it doesn't matter if you disagree because it's like, well, you're going to do it because you have a boot to your neck. Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
But in a democracy, you have to control what they think so they do what you want, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because this is almost him being somewhat kind of rosy-eyed about it, in my opinion, because he's like very much characterizing us as this democracy. And sometimes in the film and in his book, it kind of comes through that he does see America as having more freedoms than other places.
He says that explicitly at one point.
And I mean, maybe, but like some people do. I think our state, at least recently, you've been able to see that, and in past periods in our history, you're able to see that our state does not have any problem also using force on its people. Yeah, like you're free to an extent. Like you're free unless you're black, and then you might get killed. Like, it's a different scale. He kind of talks about that in terms of kind of setting the frame of like what's acceptable and what's not. Like no one's going to send in the cops to fucking bust up heads at a rally to register voters anymore. Like, Can you imagine? Or a rally to, petition the president to raise the minimum wage to $13. Some middling thing. There are some acceptable things you can do, and they're within the bounds of electoral politics. But as soon as you go out there and say, hey, we want to democratize our workplaces, we want to take over stuff, we want to start doing direct action or a general strike or something, you're going to see that we do actually have the, the boot heel and the truncheon ready to go. We're ready to deploy force, and we're not just going to sit back and say, well, how can we convince these people through the media? And they're still going to use that too, but. Yeah, it's not a simple one-way thing. I think he kind of makes that point, though, when he talks about, the civil rights movement and,
in the 30s, like just kind of the mass movements that there were, like he was kind of giving people credit of like, yeah, no, they do have the power to change things. It does take a huge movement. Yeah. So it's kind of in the media's interest to keep down these mass movements like nicely.
Okay, so those aren't contradictory. The media is trying to do like preventive work, and then you break out the heavy guns when you need to.
Mm-hmm. It's preventative and reactive. Yeah.
But yeah, he kind of says indoctrination is to democracy what force is to a dictatorship, basically.
He also talks about the targets of propaganda, which I thought was interesting. Ooh. He kind of divided up into two groups, which I thought was juicy.
Yes, yeah.
He says the political class, like you have like intellectuals, teachers, professors. I would say like probably the media itself would be this too. Mm-hmm. You know, what you think of when you think of the intelligista?
The intelligentsia?
Yeah, I always fuck that up.
The professional managerial class, you'll also hear about them.
Yes.
Those PMCs.
And then you have regular people who follow orders. And he's like, that's like 80% of people, you know, just regular ass people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the goal was different for each of these. Like, you really need to sell, indoctrinate the 20% who are going to therefore go forth and spread the good news of your system. And they're going to kind of manage the rest of the people, and they're your lieutenants.
Yeah.
You've got to get those guys. But the rest of them, you can sell them on it, sure, or you can just get them to tune the fuck out.
Yes. It was so interesting how he talks about that. Like, yeah, you don't fucking have time to research. Like, you're working 8 hours a day. Like, you're tired. Like, you've got other shit going on. Like, no one has time for this. Like, they show him in his office with like all like the papers he reads every day. He's just like, this is insane. Like, no one should do this, basically.
Yeah, he's just like, please don't become me. Like, don't
this
do
is a
this.
problem.
It's bad for you.
But like most people don't. And like, we've gotten this as a question before on like the podcast of like, where do I go for media? And I'm like, I don't fucking know, dude. Like, that's a hard question.
Yeah. I mean, I do very much like this documentary overall as kind of not an eye-opener necessarily. I mean, sort of. It's sort of eye-opening if you're
new to it,
started. But it does kind of give you some techniques or some skepticism, especially if you're still kind of like taking mainstream news sources as more or less objective fact. And I mean, I'm talking the ones that are trying to do it, quote unquote, down the line, like Associated Press or something. I mean, like, but if you can start looking at those with a critical eye, then you can really start to get at like, okay, what are we trying to say about American empire here? You know,
there's this hunger for objective facts and, you know, like, we believe in science, like those kinds of signs, you know, you see on people's yards. And like, I get it. On one level, I'm like, sure, I understand what you're trying to do, but like, it's like a surface level objective facts. Like, I understand whenever you have people saying like fake news and shit, like that's annoying, but it's also annoying to be like, no, the New York Times is the gospel. Like, you can't do both of those things and like say you're obsessed with objective facts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we'll get into this a little bit more about ownership, but you know, at the time he's talking about, you know, oh, you've got these big arbiters of the news or whatever. And he's talking about the Washington Post. That was not fucking straight up owned by Amazon.
I know.
This,
I thought the same thing. And I was like, who owned it then?
He just had to like, you know, nearly die laughing when that happened.
Oh, probably, yeah.
They're not afraid anymore. They just come out and say it.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand that desire for it, but I think there's like almost a willing blindness of like, well, there has to be some truth, so I'm going to pick this one.
You're right. Somebody's telling the truth. And like, I am a devoted reader of the New York Times. Pillory me if you want. Fine. I know, however, that these guys are, and I'll bother Abby with this a lot sometimes. It's like, oh, okay, here. I'll read the story and be like, oh, they conveniently described whatever as this, you know, kind of. Al Chomsky kind of chops apart things. It's like, oh, they would never say this about, you know, America doing this and wherever. Mm-hmm. The mainstream sources are good in terms of like good sources for news, in as much as they do really get a lot of scoops. But this documentary, I think, really lays out like the importance of being skeptical toward their intent. That's built into what like their like class position, really.
For sure, yeah. Like you think about who can afford to go to journalism school and who can afford to even be a journalist.
Do an unpaid internship before they become a reporter, all that.
Yeah, like work these shitty pay, I guess, for a while. Because there was that whole time when we're like, oh, journalism's dying. Like, who can afford to get into it then? Rich people.
Yeah. So diving deeper into this alternative theory that he's saying, the other theory, and he calls this a propaganda model of media. He calls it an institutional analysis. And that's because he's breaking this down and not saying, like, okay, what are the individuals? Like, this guy's, really creepy and he wants to take over so he's doing this thing. It's nothing like that. It's nothing like the, ultra right-wing kind of anti-Semitic sort of conspiracy theories of like Jews control the media or anything like that.
Yeah, like this guy has a sex ring, so yeah.
Right, yeah, it's nothing like that. What he's saying is an institutional analysis, these institutions, these are their like motivating factors, so this is what they're going to like aim to do. And so in the propaganda model, looking at media and saying, what does it intend to do? You end up saying, well, it ends up propagandizing for the elite, for the power structure that exists.
Yeah.
And he lays out these 5 filters.
Okay.
And they kind of go through this in the documentary a little haphazardly. So I pulled from the book, which I've also read.
Read a book.
Yes, look at me reading a book. That's another good one. If you got little intro lefties you're looking to get at, because, Chomsky kind of has, and we'll get into his personal politics a little later. He's got kind of a very friendly, I think so, sort of leftism.
Yeah, he's not scary.
Yeah. Anyway, so the 5 filters that he talks about is, first off, is ownership.
Okay.
All right. So who owns the media?
That's a great question.
They're privately owned. They have higher up parent companies. Obviously, they're not going to be like, did you know how much of a piece of shit Amazon is? It's like, well, this is the Washington Post, sir. Like, we're not running that story. But they have that bit in the documentary that is very outdated now. That runs the list of like the very few companies that own major media.
I got it. It was 23 companies owning 50% of the media. And I'm like, that ratio is so cute.
That's probably, trust busting Elizabeth Warren probably wants to get back to that.
Oh, I'm sure.
To the halcyon days of 1992.
I feel like now there's like 5 companies.
You were literally right.
They showed a chart at one point. I'm like, this looks like some QAnon shit of like all the corporations and how they're connected. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. No, but you are 100% right in there are actually 5 companies that don't control whatever paltry amount they said in the documentary. 5 companies that control 90% of U.S. media. And that was in 2017. I'm sure it hasn't just gotten better. I'm like,
we did it, guys. Free media.
Right. So those 5 companies, in case you're looking for anyone to just, completely adore as a company or, do direct action against, whatever you want to do.
Do some hexes and curses. Who am I cursing?
AT&T.
Obviously.
They have like HBO, all this stuff. God, they have so many things.
Yeah. They own everything.
Comcast. The Walt Disney Company. Viacom CBS.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that like CBS, what is it called? CBS All Access or Direct Access or something was like separate and a competitor to like Paramount, their new thing. But those are in the same parent company.
Then we should have one streaming service. If there's only 5 companies, there should only be 5 streaming services, people. Come on. Fuck off.
Right. What else? Fox Corporation.
Okay, that's it.
Definitely send them your best regards, however you choose to do so. Legally only.
Sure.
Those are the 5 companies that control 90% of U.S. media.
That's nasty.
So it's way worse than when he did the documentary. One thing he says is, okay, these these newspapers are either owned directly or owned up the chain by somebody, and they're not just going to say, hey, fuck the system, like, obviously. Yeah. And I think that's interesting because it's, it's something that people don't think about a lot of times in our economy, like, damn, why is everything so fucked up? Probably people listening to this now kind of make those questions, but a lot of people are just like, geez, can't someone come in and like provide some solutions. Like, why is, medical care so expensive? Why is housing so expensive? Like, dude, okay, so they don't make a house to like make sure you have a place to live. They do it so they can sell somebody a house and make money.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I love, at one point in the documentary, he says, like, it's not controversial to say that General Motors tries to make money.
Right. Yeah.
They're a corporation. Mm-hmm. Newspapers are also corporations.
Exactly. They are trying to make money. They're doing the news not as a public service, but to sell you something. To sell someone else you, really.
Yeah, and it's not like the individual journalists are evil, like, I'm only doing this for profit. Like, They want to keep their jobs. Like, I get it.
Yes, yeah. There was a little miscellaneous thing I wanted to mention. This guy who, they ask him, hey, Frank Cessno of CNN, tell us about like the self-censorship over there regarding like the coverage of the Gulf War and stuff, like.
This was so juicy.
And you're saying, yeah, these journalists, like, they're not, evil. They just now have an institutional way of looking at things. Mm-hmm. Like they see themselves as, an agent of CNN, and that's a good thing or whatever, right? So he says, when asked about self-censorship, he says, well, there's no self-censorship. If somebody tells me something, I'm going to pass it on. Without missing a beat, he continues, unless there's a particular or compelling reason not to.
Like, what the fuck?
Paraphrasing the rest of what he says, he kind of says, I can't deny that I'd like to have access to everything the president's looking at, but that's not possible, it's not realistic, and it's probably not even desirable. You have just self-censored in an answer where you said, I don't self-censor. Like,
even the part where he's like, unless I have a compelling reason, like, what is that compelling reason? Is that your fucking parent company? Like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. So this ownership filter is super strong, even if you don't intend it to be, really. Even if you're like, I'm going to go into it for the right reasons. I'm going to, speak truth to power, all that.
Yeah, yeah. They do this all the time on like the West Wing. They're constantly trying to get like Danny to shut down a story. And they're just like, hey, you get an interview with the president if you don't do this. Like, that happens.
Yep. The next filter is advertisers.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes on this discussion about saying, well, the newspapers and he, is a product of the 1992 time of the documentary, talking about newspapers and talking about...
Yeah. Just take newspapers and replace it with other things, guys.
I think they're broadly like still kind of important online. I think that a lot...
Online
they're still like agenda setters in that term. But like he says, okay, well, anyone producing the news, right? They want to get an elite, an affluent audience. They want people who bring in the advertising dough. Now, you have more experience maybe with marketing, advertising. That's right, correct? Like, you want to get people with money?
Oh, for fucking sure. Like, yeah, there's some nasty meetings on there. Like, yeah, we are definitely looking for people with money, or to trick people who, like, we don't think are smart to give us their money. Those are the two options.
Okay, yeah. That's who you're targeting. And I guess maybe the more long-term stable solution is to just get rich people to like your thing, right? So he says advertisers is a filter because like they're going to present kind of a pro-elite message, something that attracts like flies to one of those bug zapper things, the elite to your product, so that then you can turn around to whoever the fuck, Porsche, and be like, hey, all the rich assholes watch my show. Run an ad. Yeah.
And like we've mentioned this before, like even the Apple News Roundup, it's very like aspirational. Like New York Times is this way too. It's like, we're going to tell you about how to, best take care of your mental health, and like just like all these like little buzzwords, but that are not accessible to like working class people.
Right. Yeah. The New York Times acts like everybody's been ensconced in their houses the entire lockdown. And it's just like,
yes, it's insane.
I don't know, dude. I taught this whole school here. Like, that ain't me. Yeah, you're right. It's very much from this elite perspective. And Chomsky's theory says that's because they're courting advertisers. And they're saying, look at the wealthy people, the, cash cows that you can milk if you advertise with us.
They have a stat of like 60% of newspapers are advertisement. I bet that's even crazier now too. I mean, I haven't picked up a print newspaper in a minute.
But, yeah. Me neither. And it's interesting. that's probably morphed in some other way now, because you have to look at how even effective is advertising, like in your online model. You know, it's kind of have to do like paywall subscription sort of thing.
There's paywalls, and then also just like ads at the beginning of things interspersed throughout your Instagram stories, whatever. There's a lot of ways to do ads now.
Yeah, okay. The third filter is sourcing. And he says kind of like, okay, well, getting your sources from, it's really easy, and you kind of almost get co-opted or brought into the game, so to speak, if you're given, like you were saying about West Wing with what's his face, Danny, is he gets a little bit co-opted. They're like, well, we'll give you this, story. You'll be kind of an insider, get him a little bit of buy-in to where he sort of identifies with. He may be a little adversarial or whatever, but like, he's not that adversarial.
Yeah, there's definitely like clout is the word I was thinking of. Like you're an insider. That means you're important. Like journalists can be kind of like pseudo celebrities, especially like when TV, like cable news was really, really big. Like now it's different. I mean, you can still be Twitter famous. So there's that. True.
You get the scoops, you break the big news or whatever, that sort of thing. And I think that what he's maybe more focused on is the willingness of news organizations, broadly speaking, to kind of take and then just kind of mouthpiece, not really criticize too much. Reports that they straight up get from the White House press briefings, reports that they straight up get from the Department of Defense, from the CIA, from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, from whoever is telling them, today we had this operation where we kinetically, whatever. Like, they just fucking repeat that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Did you hear about like the press secretary, what they asked her the first day?
No, I tried to stay away.
They said, are you going to tell us the whole unvarnished truth? Someone asked her that, and she was like, yes, of course. And it's like, no, that's literally not her job.
Yeah. I get paid not to. I get paid to
that's her job.
Feed you something that looks good.
It's insane. But yeah, there is this kind of worshiping of these figures.
Wow.
I think that's a big part of it. Like we're talking about self-censorship. I think a lot of it is patriotism. I think a lot of it is this insane worship of institutions.
It's patriotism for sure, or kind of like playing on a team. Because otherwise, like, if you think about the sorts who are like, oh, I believe in science, or I want a free, press that tells the truth and just the facts or whatever. Like, okay, if you actually believed in that, you would have taken that reporter who asked that question, stripped them of the press credentials, and burned them at the stake as a heretic. Like, that's ridiculous to ask that sort of a question.
Yeah, like, and they had this quote in the documentary, too, of like, it's not like communist level sensitizing, but there is some sensitizing in the US media. And I'm like, we have a fucking propaganda machine right now. Like there's very few stories now about COVID deaths. The masks thing was bonkers. Like if Trump had fallen up the stairs of a plane, it'd be fucking on Twitter 24/7 for a month.
Yeah. And everyone would be like, that's what you get, you fat fuck, or whatever. Like,
yeah.
Joe Biden would be like, maybe if he ate less Big Macs, Mac, you would climb up. Like there'd be all sorts of gross shit that they would be doing.
Oh, for sure. And there is this team obsession. I think that's one of the things that was kind of missing from this documentary personally, because it was back in the day.
Yeah, of the partisanship fight is what you're saying.
There wasn't like the extreme partisanship, or like at least not the appearance of it. I mean, I'm not old enough to know what was going on then, but like I know it was partisan, like we shut down the government in the 90s or whatever, but like at one point they talk about voting and how it's like kind of a false choice, and like a lot of people know that, like like you used to have people saying like, oh, Democrats and Republicans are the same.
Two sides.
You don't have
same
that
coin.
now. You don't have that. Like it's like a fucking life or death decision. Like you're a terrible person if you don't vote because you're sending kids to camps.
You're saying that that's kind of in the popular discourse, is everyone sees that as a super different choice, even though like if you strip back identity politics, like they're pretty similar. Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, we got tell you some more Huey Long quotes from
No. I know
Low
they're
Papa
fucking sane.
Hiram and High Papa Lowram, but no. Yeah, and they're not the same.
They're not. One of them's racist, and obviously that's worse. But like, this one's not racist, but still racist in terms of it upholds capitalism. It just doesn't say like the N word.
One of them says you're racist while doing the racist stuff, and one of them is just we're all racist. What? It's fine. Anyway, stupid partisan politics aside. Yeah, no. I agree that like the documentary, product of its time, I think kind of doesn't focus on too much the culture. They don't really go out there and I think that there was maybe this 1992. This is before Bill Clinton's election. This is almost because Bill Clinton like just runs as a Republican basically. He just says I'm running on the Democratic Party, but I'm a Republican.
We're gonna get rid of crime and drugs, and we're gonna do welfare checks. Like but not like money checks, like checking up on them.
Yeah, fraud and stuff. Yeah, it's like it's this wonderful sort of almost post-partisan. It's post-Cold War sort of moment. We've just become the sole hegemon of the world. We're it, and it's this triumph of kind of like Reagan and Bush and stuff before 92, which obviously just craters the whole thing. And aside, I agree with your point that I think that he could have. Well, I just don't think the time was there. Yeah. So we're looking at it like, what? Yeah. Another filter in the theory is called Flack. I don't think they talk about this too much in the documentary, but Flack is the concept of negative responses. When the media do run some sort of controversial story, you've got they brought the wrong guest on, or they did, they ran some story from a junior guy who was trying to make a name for himself or whatever. They break the rule. They break from conformity. They get slammed.
Can you give examples?
Okay, so a good example in the modern times would be somebody running a story that says, hey, maybe Israel shouldn't be fucking shelling Palestinians.
Okay, that was an easy one. I set you up, huh?
And, okay, well, then you got the fucking, Anti-Defamation League coming down on them and saying, oh, well, you're being anti-Semitic for saying that Israel shouldn't be able to do whatever it wants foreign policy-wise or whatever, right? Like, that's an example of Flack.
I loved when they said that the media gets to set not only the agenda of what news coverage we're picking up, but also the boundaries of like what reasonable people can discuss. Yeah. Like, think about it. Like, there was a huge shift with Bernie. Like, full disclosure, I'm still wearing my Bernie shirt as we record. But you'll never have a real leftist on CNN. Like, that just won't fucking happen.
No, they're not going to put a Marxist-Leninist on there. Or they'll just, cut them off, make them a straw man, do something. They're not going to just give them a mouthpiece.
No, they don't take them seriously. And you can see people get watered down the longer they stay in that system. Like, even AOC, like, she's really watered the fuck down. Where is her anger about concentration camps now?
Yeah.
Not seeing it.
Yeah, AOC, big picture here a little bit. Zoom out, kind of Marxist leftist perspective here.
Yes.
This is something that we've seen in a lot of things we've talked about. The dangers of pursuing a more electoral strategy.
You become part of the system. You get the clout. You get the celebrity. You get, it. This was very frustrating to me. We talked about this weekend. There was a local election here recently, and there's this woman in my district who, like, everyone agrees sucks. Like, everyone's like, yeah, she hasn't done anything. She never shows up to our neighborhood. She just, like, kind of blows people off. But then people ended up being like, well, she knows how the system works, so I'm going to vote for her. And I'm like, clearly the system isn't working.
She knows how the shitty system that she's a part of works.
Exactly. Like, there's this weird reverence for, like, oh, your experience, that must mean you're good at this, when it really means your experience, you're more likely to not give a shit.
Okay, so what I want to be happening is that AOC is like, she's got her hand, she's scheming. She's got this.
She's playing some Game of Thrones long game shit.
She's going to get into power and say, all right.
Just kidding, guys. I was communist the whole time.
I am now first comrade AOC. We've abolished the Constitution. Like, she's going to get in there and, like, just, do a coup, do a revolution, and that's it.
That'd be hilarious.
But no one ever is actually doing that. People get co-opted by the system on the way.
they get comfortable, just like regular people get comfortable.
And it's why, going back to the classic example, the Bolsheviks were saying the Mensheviks are bullshit. Like, they agreed to work with the provisional government, and they got in, and what do? They said, oh, well, you know, this is fine. Like, we'll eventually get out of the war, you know? And the Mensheviks were repaid with getting thrown out. You know, the Bolsheviks were able to ride that popular wave of discontent and say, no, fuck this.
Not good enough.
Other leftist movements have floundered on the rocks because we try to do something else, and we try to say, well, you know, what about Bernie, or what about whatever. And again, you're wearing the Bernie shirt. I fully supported Bernie.
I really do think things could have taken a, not like a hard left turn into communism or anything, but like things would be better.
Oh, sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think that was a real missed opportunity. I still get sad about that. Like, my least favorite thing is whenever my phone shows me memories from like February of last year. And I'm like, man, that was nice.
Yeah.
Having hope.
Right before the pandemic hit, we got to go to a rally. It was fun as shit.
It was so good.
But yeah, when the media does break from its mold and run something that is controversial from the point of view of the elites, no matter how common sense it makes, you know, oh, maybe we shouldn't do war crimes in this place, or hey, maybe the planet's on fire and we got to, like, you know, try to survive with the massive movement never before seen in the human, you know, in the history of the human race.
And not just like, we should all recycle, like actually pinning it on the people who are fucking doing
right,
it.
like not increase car emissions standards by 10% by 2050.
Yeah.
You know, like actual actions. Whenever they run something like that, they get fucking flack. And a lot of times that's run by very wealthy donors or very powerful corporations. You mentioned the Anti-Defamation League. I mean, that's a powerful lobby. But you also have something called the Global Climate Coalition. Those motherfuckers sound like they are green as shit, right? Like, these guys are actually made up of, for example, fossil fuel companies like Exxon and Texaco.
Great.
And so that's why you see like the ExxonMobil commercials that's like, oh, I'm a scientist looking to fight climate change and I'm doing all these researches on how we're going to but it's, and then the end of the commercial is Exxon. What? Global Climate Coalition, though, is just an example. Like, these guys, you know, will mob you know, any sort of media that they'll just flood them with everything they can if they, you know, air a climate scientist that's like being too, you know, alarmist about climate change and everything. It's just like, that's, you know, that's something that factors into your mind when you're booking guests and shit is, you know, who, you know, am I going to piss somebody off? Like, anybody who's thinking, maybe I'll talk to Chomsky, is thinking somebody's going to get up here and say, that anti-Semitic fuck, you had him on here and blah, blah, blah. You know, he doesn't support everything Israel does or whatever. Like, that's definitely weighing in their minds when they make these decisions.
Yeah, for sure. Ugh.
And this is an interesting point too, because it's again with that, this is not a secret cabal. The Flack angle is purely self-interest. Do I want to have to deal with some assholes coming at me for a story I do? Like, it's
do you want to get fired?
Yeah. And it's not like, how can I help capitalism and imperialism?
Yeah, you're not getting back pay for that. You're just trying to save your own skin.
Right, yeah. You're doing your job, you know. The fifth of the filters is norms or fear. Initially, in the original copy of the book in 1988, this was anti-communism. They've since revised it because that's not the primary thread anymore, although it's kind of latent and built in now. It's no longer, what are the Soviets doing? You know, like, it's...
Yeah. Just fear-based.
Yeah, it's the idea that, like, journalists kind of, and more broadly, the media industry, everybody involved in it, has kind of, like, internalized this sort of us and them mentality that's cultivated broadly in our culture. And so we have these societal norms and defend them as, like, members of that team, like it's us, you know, and we... you know, in some way that the media, and honestly, you can just fall into it on accident. You can describe yourself that way too, with the United States, with companies, even whatever.
I mean, this kind of gets into like their the war coverage of things. Like you're an American. You're going to want to make America look good. Like that's a bias that you have.
Yes.
And you're going to conveniently leave things out where we don't look good. And you're going to highlight when other people do things that are bad. Like, again, like just, it's in the news a fucking lot, but like Israel and Palestine, like that's a very easy one. Like the use of passive voice, man, it's doing a lot of work these days.
Jeez.
Like Palestinians were killed.
They just end up getting killed somehow. Like, I don't know what they're doing, if they just are, running with scissors or something. But
spike pits everywhere.
Quicksand, a lot of it probably.
A lot of quicksand.
Not to belittle the situation. We're making light of it in a terrible, kind of gallows humor here. It's fucked up. Fuck Israel, the Israeli government, the settlements, all of it is bullshit, an apartheid state. I mean, I don't know, we have to offer further comment, but
that's the tweet. Send tweet.
Yeah.
Let's get to teams though. Let's talk about teams.
All right. Talking about teams.
Guys, this might have been my favorite section of the documentary.
Okay. All right. We're going to have some back and forth here.
He talks about sports and how their primary function is giving the public something to pay attention to, something to distract them.
Bread and circuses is the old phrasing of it.
And I love how he talks about it, though. He's like, think about how much intellectualism is focused towards sports. Like, oh my gosh, like my husband watches the 30 for 30 documentaries, and I actually have watched them, and they're very good.
Those are good. Yeah.
They're really good. And I fucking hate sports.
Those are good. Another one for listeners looking for some good sports. I don't know. The Venn diagram is probably not really there for this, but still. Sports fans out there, another good one that I like anyway are the ones from, I think it's from NFL Network, called A Football Life. And they do like little pictures of different people. They're pretty short and I like them. So they're informative.
I don't know. And then the secondary thing of like, it's also teaching you about team mentality and like groupthink and following the rules. Rules are really big in sports. Like, I think that's so interesting.
I do think there's, a lot there. I mean, first of all, I will say I'm a fan of sports. Sports are excellent. IMO. Okay. And we talked about this in one of our listener question episodes. We talked about, what would sports look like under communism, right? One of our classic diversions from Marx, who would say, I don't know, communism hasn't happened yet, but
who gives a shit?
We like to speculate. People are gonna do sports, and I mean, like, we love sports. It's fun and competitive, and just like, honestly, I think that if we ever get replaced by robots or aliens, like, they're still gonna watch us do sports. Like, that's gonna be like a dog competition, a dog showing, but for humans, and we're going to be doing sports because it's just one of the things that we do and we like to do, and it's competitive and fun. It's like,
yes.
But you're right. I didn't really think about this until watching this documentary, is kind of how much, although it touches on something we've talked about before with advertising and such, and is how much human intelligence, human effort is wasted, eaten up in this. Like, we could have somebody like curing cancer, putting us on Saturn or something, orbiting Saturn. I mean, like, really fucking cool shit. But and it's a kind of a testament to how smart and kind of cool humans are, is that we can do all that, but for fucking sports. Like,
but I mean, you could say the same thing about like art and stuff, like, sure. I do think like humans deserve nice things. I don't think it's like, no, we all gotta put your back into it. That's
true.
But I see what you're saying. Like, it is kind of, it's monumental how much effort and dollars and time goes into sports.
Yeah. And I don't know. I was watching that and I was like, I don't think there's anything nefarious about like team sports as a concept or anything. But I do see his point as to, well, okay, capitalism obviously sees this as useful. So they pour a ton of resources in terms of covering it in the media, in terms of sponsoring it, in terms of demanding public funds to build these huge cathedrals in its honor. Like, okay, I get that part for sure. Like, the money side of it, definitely. That was spot on.
I will say, It doesn't have to be that way. So one of the 30 for 30 documentaries I watched was like, the Miracle story in the 80s, like the US versus Russia hockey team, right? They did that, but from the Russian side. And I loved this documentary because it was so interesting. They're saying like Russian hockey is super different from like Canadian hockey because they were the big guys. They're still the big guys in hockey. They're saying that like they're all about the team. Like that they were like a fucking unit, man. And like that's how they played. And I thought that was so cool. And like
comrades, man.
Yeah, they're fucking comrades. It was just a different way to look at sports of like, it's not about like there's a star player and he's,
right.
Like
we are in service to him. Yeah.
It can be very celebrity and individualism and bootstrap
kind of
culture.
Fascistic too, like subservient yourself to this leader. Like
yes. Yeah. There's a captain and all that shit. Or a coach, but like their way was much more team oriented. I'm like, that's where it's at. Yeah. That's cool.
I did like some of the phrases used here is, when he talks about cheering for his high school team. And I was like, dude, you do kind of have these breakthroughs at some point, or like just kind of like weird thoughts. And you're like, it's just like, I just happened to grow up here and like go to this school. And he's like, I don't know anybody on the team. Why the fuck am I cheering for them?
That's hilarious.
I thought that was neat. The irrational attitudes of submission to authority.
Yes, and irrational jingoism.
Yeah. Training in irrational jingoism. I mean, again, I don't think it's a nefarious project, but I will add that it is nefarious when the Department of Defense decides that at every single one of these events, you need to make sure to like have a flyover of the things that you use to bomb brown people overseas. You need to make sure to like have a giant fucking flag to remember all the people, all the victims of terrorism, not directed by your state. You have to do all these symbols of American patriotism. Like, I mean, that's intentional.
I mean, if you look at the breakdown of like, I mean, now there are liberal people who are into sports, there are leftists who are into sports, but like, it is a pretty conservative culture. Like, if I show up to a sports game, like, I'm gonna look pretty queer compared to everybody else. Like, I'm not exactly their demo. Unless it's a roller derby event, then I would look great. I'd really fit in.
And it's sort of American, and broadly speaking, I mean, you do have different crews that are different. Like, apparently, the Minnesota United FC and MLS, like, they have supporters groups for Americans here. It's called the Red Loons, and they're very like leftist and
weird
stuff. And you have kind of some of that culture there. And in Europe, this is way different. You do have kind of like left wing, right wing kind of groups for different clubs, and some clubs are like just considered left wing and all that.
What? That's okay. I would go to those sports games. That sounds great. I like soccer too. So
it's different. I mean, but like you're right. Speaking from an American's perspective, sports tend to be more conservative, depending on the sport, I guess, too. But I thought that was an interesting little road that he went down.
Oh, for sure. I love that.
So he is asked kind of about, okay, well, your theory of the propaganda model of media, what evidence do you have for this? Because this is quite the claim.
Yes.
And he kind of, at some point, talks about like, well, when you make crazy claims, you got to kind of back it up by evidence, and that's to be expected. I agree.
Yeah. Real quick, he talks about the condition of concision, which I love that term. That because media has like, they're trying to get your attention, they only have it for a certain amount of time, and like we talked about earlier, that time is infinitesimally smaller now.
Seconds now. Communism is good.
Yeah, that's the tweet. Bye.
That's it.
But the beauty of this is that you don't really have time to explain anything, so all you can have time to say is communism is good, and then the media will be like, this guy's crazy. Like, you don't have time to actually like back up your shit.
Guy says communism is good.
Yeah. When it comes to mainstream media, like, it's very hard to like have nuance, basically.
Oh yeah, that's why the classic TLDR exists.
Yes. All right, but back to this.
He's asked kind of, well, what's your proof of the of the media theory? And he says, okay, well, like one thing we can do, because the world's kind of messy and it doesn't really provide you with experiments necessarily, but we can kind of compare situations.
Yes.
He says, okay, well, we've got two situations here. We have the situation of Cambodia under the rule of the Khmer Rouge and East Timor. Okay, so yeah, kind of a brief summary of what's going on here. He says, okay, well, Cambodia was under the rule of Pol Pot, who was definitely shitty. You really have to dive into the deepest circles of like complete tankiness to kind of get to people who are like, I don't know, Pol Pot. I mean, Pol Pot is so bad that people are like, yeah, he was a CIA op, is what people will get around to in leftist circles as being like, he's so bad. He's
so evil, cartoonishly evil.
Right. That's how fucking shitty he was. Because, I mean, he was just like killing people.
Yeah.
Know? This dictatorship, lots of atrocities, tons of death, and tons of media coverage, talking kind of in the 70s, especially kind of getting into the mid to late 70s, 75, 79, once America had started to decide to kind of pull back from the war in Vietnam. That, for one, garnered a lot of attention in the press, and Chomsky kind of draws a couple of things here. He says, okay, for one, a lot of the stories that talked about Cambodia said they phrased it as this terrible atrocity happening in this smiling good region.
That's a really racist sounding term.
First of all, yes. Like, what do we see in the smiling face of these people? But, okay, I think it was murder in a smiling land or something like that. But it was like...
just exoticizing.
Talking about this peaceful, idyllic sort of Cambodia that never existed before then. Like, they had routine, they had imperialism happen to them for a long time. And immediately before the rise of the Khmer Rouge, the United States was bombing the fuck out of Cambodia.
Okay, so why did we do that? I caught that and I was like, wait, what?
Because the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army were using army bases and stuff in Cambodia. And Lyndon Johnson, when he was president, knew about this shit and was like, but I don't want to actually like piss off Congress and get people involved and all that stuff. So he didn't do anything about it. When Nixon becomes president, Nixon is just like, what if I don't tell them? And just decides to start bombing them.
Cool.
And it was something like 5 congressional leaders or something knew about the secret bombings in Cambodia that he had ordered. And they just start like bombing people all over the place. Hundreds of thousands of people are killed in Cambodia throughout the American bombing campaign there. That's not something that the U.S. press ever focused on. They act like everything was roses until the Khmer Rouge show up.
Yeah, and it's the classic fucking meme of like, who did this? Like, yeah, like it happens in open veins. Like this is a fucking recurring theme of like, we go in and fuck up a region and then are surprised when it continues to be fucked up.
Yeah, and so the Khmer Rouge kind of take power and do really bad shit. But they're a communist country now, so
now we can be mad.
They say, whoa, so many people are dying there. It's bad. I
bad.
thought it was fairly well done in the documentary. He's like, yeah, that was fucked up. Like, they should not have done that. That was bad.
For sure.
Whereas at the time, kind of people were messing up on that and were like, I don't know, maybe they're doing socialism. They're kind of being hopeful. And it did not turn out well. The comparison that he uses to this is a region called East Timor.
Okay.
Which was previously a Portuguese colony.
Okay.
After kind of independence, pretty much immediately, then they had a civil war, and a group called Fretilin won the civil war, basically.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a coalition government led by them that takes power. And the documentary kind of describes they're kind of like a Catholic populist with some kind of left-wing kind of rhetoric. In 1975, the United States, and very close ally of Indonesia, gives them the green light to invade.
Okay, yeah. In the documentary, they said, who was it that was visiting? Was it Carter?
Gerald Ford.
Or Ford. Sorry, Carter. You're cool.
Not that cool.
I mean, yeah, but cooler than Ford. It's all degrees. So yeah, Ford was visiting with his wife, and they had already kind of made up their minds that yeah, we're going to let this happen, but they waited to give the green light until they left. It's so awkward.
You don't want to have to give a press conference coming off of Air Force One. Like, did you see the tanks invading this tiny country?
Totally. They're visiting Indonesia. I don't think I made that clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Indonesia invaded did fucking war crimes all over the place. Terrible, awful. It is less, fewer deaths in absolute terms for sure than Cambodia. But actually, the documentary made clear like more proportionally to the population. A greater bloodbath in terms of percentage.
Yes.
And fucking radio silence, pretty much.
Yeah.
Almost nothing. They did that I loved. I thought was cool. It was kind of quirky, but I thought it was cool. The little rollout of column inches.
I loved that. Yes. They rolled out the inches of newspaper column devoted to Cambodia and East Timor, like respectively. And one was like, I don't know, 10 feet long or something. And the other one was like fucking like 40 feet long. It was crazy.
They keep turning on floodlights to like illuminate more of the gym floor or whatever. That was cool.
That was very cool. But yeah, and then like the U.S. provided the arms for this shit, right? Like, I mean, again, we still do that.
They provided, tons of arms.
90% of the arms, I think is what they said.
Yeah. And I mean, even they give the green light to do this thing, and they're like, kind of keep it clean, like Kissinger was telling the Operation Condor people, like, get it done and get clean because we don't want to have to deal with it. They did basically the same thing here. It's just like, please take care of this quickly, and then we'll cover for you.
Jesus.
And then they come to them like almost immediately, like, we need more guns. Like, that's how fucking violent they were running this whole thing. And again, it gets almost no coverage. Chomsky's work actually does bring attention to this, and really does kind of have the effect of bringing the international community's kind of eyes to bear on the East Timor situation, which was very inconvenient for the United States, in terms of having to deal with this. Eventually, it does force the next president. So that president was Suharto in Indonesia. He was a dictator that America was propping up. And once he was gone, the next guy, because of the international pressure at this point, was like, okay, we're going to have a referendum. They can leave or they can stay with Indonesia as like autonomous status. And the government went around saying like, oh, these guys are like, they're going to agree to stay with us because we're like good and we've never done anything wrong there. And they're like, it's going to be fine. Like, don't worry about it. They're like 90-something% of the people show up. 70% that vote say like, no, fuck that.
Yeah, I'm gone.
You guys have been murdering us for a long time.
No.
I mean, like, that's in 1999, by the way. So that's like 20 years later.
Oh my gosh, 20 years of genocide.
And so as soon as that vote is over, Indonesia sends in the military and destroys 80% of their infrastructure.
Oh my God. Like, fine, if you don't want to live with us, we're going to fuck your shit up.
Yeah, and they murder tons of people, too.
Fuck.
Thousands of people are killed in that. A lot of students, especially, because they targeted students who were like, who had been active in the campaign of the vote. And it was just a complete, utter
massacre.
Destructive bloodshed. Yeah. And this was hitherto, an American ally before that point and everything. Insane. Before the kind of like switch, I guess.
He also talks about, like, as related to wars broader, I guess, that often there is an option of peace, but like, it's like, we don't really consider that as an option. And like, the media doesn't really present that as an option. And they give an example of George Bush saying aggressors can't be rewarded, even though he was the head of the CIA during the East Timor conflict. Like, you were rewarded by becoming president.
Let me break out my George Bush file here. This guy, a true...
real piece of shit.
True villain of history. First of all, for any of you, conspiracy heads out here, he has no idea where in Texas he was on November 22nd, 1963. Just throwing that out
no
there.
Alibi.
Could not remember where he was. Like,
too drunk.
I mean, why is that your story? Like,
yeah, that's
I was in
a terrible
Texas,
story.
But who knows where I was?
That's a really bad alibi.
He got like a special briefing on that, and then afterward, like, someone found like that the CIA gave a briefing to a George Bush, from the CIA about the events in Dallas. But then the CIA was like, yeah, we did, but that was actually
a different one.
That was a different, it was a different George Bush. It was a guy who worked the night shift, who they interviewed him later. This magazine interviewed him later and was like, that didn't happen. So a lot of shady shit as far as that goes. But anyway, if you are in charge of the CIA, first of all, you are doing war crimes. You are like murdering people, getting people murdered.
Yeah, you are an aggressor.
Yes. So you and he, what is it? Chomsky says he's the only head of state at the time, I guess, the only head of state to have been accused of. Stand accused in the world court, basically, or something, like as an aggressor. And I mean, he presided over the invasion of Panama, which was just fucking bullshit so that we could get the Panama Canal region. I mean, like,
Jesus,
this dude had done some fucked up shit.
Yeah.
He gets this kind of pass as just being like, oh, kind of folksy, whatever sort of guy, harmless wasp because he's, blue-blooded or whatever, but he was a fucked up old school CIA guy.
Man, he did some shit.
Yale Skull and Bones, like secret society back when those meant something. We could do an episode on this guy. Point is, never give George Bush. He can like seem nice to you or whatever, but fuck him.
Yeah.
Damn, I lost.
You just got really mad about Bush for a second.
Yeah.
It was about aggressors being rewarded.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we like to pretend that our American presidents aren't war criminals. At all. And everyone else who has done something, not everyone else who contravenes our interests as a country.
Socialists.
Right, yeah. Anyone who's not aligned with American imperialism, who does anything questionable, they're
the bad guys.
Morally reprehensible, That's why you're like, fuck Hamas, fuck anything that the Palestinians do. Because they're not laying down for American domination. Whereas we don't do the same for the IDF. We don't do the same for Mossad. We don't do the same for Israel at all, Well,
and Chomsky says something to the effect of like, basically all U.S. presidents would be hanged for war crimes, like based on the Nuremberg trials. And I'm like, we should be more upset about this. What the fuck, guys?
Yes. Now, this is 100% true. There's this wonderful interview where he just runs through the list and because the guy's incredulous, of course.
Yeah, it's like, what are you talking about?
Seriously? And it's funny because Chomsky will be like, yeah, so Eisenhower did this. He talks about Guatemala,
Yeah.
That was Eisenhower. He talks about, Kennedy trying to knock off Cuba with the Bay of Pigs. I think for, Lyndon Johnson, he's like, I almost don't need to go into that, but Vietnam, Nixon, I definitely don't need to go into that. It's Nixon.
It's Nixon. Like, that one's obvious.
Everyone knows. But yeah, like that is 100% true.
You mentioned earlier, like there's definitely a setting up of like good guys and bad guys. And they talk about this, like someone asks him like, well, what about the Czechs? Don't you care about them getting murdered? Like, aren't they like experiencing genocide? And like, first off, that's classic, like whataboutism. Like,
sure.
Yeah, fuck you. Like, that's not a real debate, thing to do. When we set up these comparisons between like Stalinist imperialism and U.S. imperialism, like obviously imperialism sucks. Like that's fuck yeah.
That's our motto.
Yeah, that's our motto. But to me, at least it read as we don't care about these guys because they're brown people. And like we really give a shit about Eastern Europeans being killed because they look like us.
They devote a lot of the book Manufacturing Consent to the concept of worthy and unworthy victims. This sort of like idea of some people are, targets of genocide that you need to like cry about and see on your TV and say, what can we do? And some people it's just like, I mean, that happens, and we get this in the news even, these days. I mean, somebody will fucking drive a car bomb into a school or something in Kabul in Afghanistan, and it's just like, 40 people died in Afghanistan and 200 were wounded. It's a blip.
Yeah.
And you got like 6 people stabbed, and I don't want to say like don't fucking care about the other, but like if it happens in Europe and it's like 10 people killed versus
it's a huge news story. Yeah. Like the Notre Dame like catching on fire. No one got hurt in that, but like everyone was like, oh my gosh, like rending their fucking garments over it. Like it's just really interesting how we decide like what's important, and it is very racist is how we decide what's important.
It's racist and imperialist in the sense of like it definitely depends on, because we can, they can spin up a good sob story about somebody, suffering from, I mean, that's what they were doing in Venezuela. That's what they're doing anywhere that they have somebody that they're trying to, put someone else up in. It's just, what are these poor brown people.
That's the thing, that when they do it though, like even with Cambodia, we were talking about that, like they do it grossly. They do it like as, look at these innocent brown savages, and like everything was great until now. Like there's this weird exoticizing, super gross. Like you saw that a lot when we were coming up. Like Africa was just like a starving continent, and like that's all you knew about it.
The only thing you ever would see about Africa would be like kids who were suffering from starvation and had like the potbelly thing.
Like you never got the context of like, hey, there are all these like civil wars and shit. Like here's why that's happening. You just got like there's this
civil wars where the
continent.
CIA went in and knocked somebody off or something.
You never got that part of the story.
All right. So that's a big part of it. That's a big example, I guess, is he kind of lays out this, and it's very clear cut in times of war and everything. The media is like, this is our time to shine, and boom, let's go do the thing for imperialism, because they get caught up in that sort of taking sides thing, I think.
Yeah. And they talk about, this might have been earlier in the documentary, but they talk about like, basically someone has to decide what the news is, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, because
that's
you can
the
see
New York
it,
Times
like,
guy saying, and in the ABC newsroom with Peter Jennings.
I saw him. I love him.
I want none of this media criticism to go to him or his memory, even though he was probably totally engaged.
He probably sucked.
We watched a lot of him growing up.
Yeah, he was our dinner time companion for many years.
Yeah.
But no, like you think about like the AP wires, like they tell you what news is and everyone else just parrots it. And so, then it gets watered down from publication to publication to like suit their needs.
Yeah, for sure. It's part of that, part of the filters thing. It trickles through the media filters, the whole process. Yeah,
like they have, this is another weird kitschy scene, was they did like a surgery, like an operating room. And they had like the original report from, I think
Australia.
It was like, Australia, yeah, because they were doing a lot of the East Timor coverage because they're like right next door. And the New York Times picked it up, but they like cut out a bunch of stuff. And so they did this cool like operating scene where they're like scalpeling out bits and like sewing it back together. It was really cool and also cheesy and stupid. And I liked it.
That one was one that worked for sure. I thought.
Some of them didn't, but
they put on a caption, actual deletions, and they fucking cannibalized that article. But that they would have the gall to print the rest of it like as a story was,
it's insane.
Because like, I mean, just read that story and put it in your own words. Any kid copying homework can do that.
But no, they just blatantly rip it.
Yeah. That was wild.
I had one more point on this imperialist bit. There was a quote that I liked that was, there is no correlation between internal freedom and external behavior.
Ooh.
Basically, you can say America's free, that's fucking great, but it doesn't matter because you still have imperialism. Like, you're still doing bad shit. Not everybody's free. And
this is the big leftist kind of argument against one of kind of our friends of the show here, social democracy.
Yeah.
Is that if you do have social democracy in its true meaning of having capitalism, but just kind of constraining it to work for the people,
you're still
capitalism people. Is gonna, it's gonna have to get its exploitation somewhere, and that's the rest of the world. That's imperialism.
Yep, and it sucks.
So you'll live high on the hog, and you won't have that much inequality, but compared to the rest of the world, I saw this meme on Reddit. It was some character in The Simpsons like going up to this little rotating tray of desserts. And he's like, oh, how great. But then they zoomed in and it was like Homer like turning this wheel to turn the desserts and this guy like whipping him or whatever. And it was like, this is social democracy. Like,
yeah.
This looks so nice, but really there's a terrible price to pay.
For sure. It's the little kid stuck in the train in Snowpiercer.
Oh, yeah, that's a great tie-in. You can have such a, free society And, like we mentioned earlier, Chomsky tries to, kind of says America has all these freedoms.
Yeah.
And Western democracies of any sort can have all these freedoms, but play their role in an American-dominated, imperialist system. Or if they're in America, just straight up, American imperialism.
Yeah. Like he talks about, this kind of gets into our next section, which I have just titled Debates. Noam Chomsky gets into it with people and I love it. But at one point, this fucking frat boy comes up to the mic at one of his talks. I think this is the one in Laramie. Oh, that guy cracked me up.
I didn't know who you were talking about, so you described him coming up to the mic, and I was just like, oh, yeah. That didn't come across a frat boy to me. It came across as like a fedora guy.
He had Greek symbols on his sweater.
Oh, okay. That may have been frat stuff.
Yeah.
Then. Okay.
And he basically just like, what are you whining about? Like, you're covered in the media. Like, you're this famous guy. Yeah, they let you talk here. You would get shot if you said this somewhere else. Like, all this. It was insane. Yes. I laughed so hard. And basically, he's just like, yeah, I mean, yeah, we do have freedoms here. Like, and I'm not complaining. Like, I don't give a shit if, like, I'm famous or not. Like, that's not what I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
He says he gets less pushback outside the United States, though. Like in Canada and stuff, because they have less like of a world stage power.
I thought that was a good discussion too, because he basically says that Canada, or wherever he's talking about, right, don't have as much to defend. Like when he criticizes American empire, they're like, oh, that's fine. I mean,
yeah, you're right. They suck.
We like those guys when they ask us if we like them, but other than that, you can criticize them in our media. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like, what is Joe Biden going to do? Call us up. Hey, Mac, I saw your report. It was terrible. Like, why did you let that guy say those things about, did you know? And then he just forgets and falls asleep on the phone. That's fine. No big deal.
Yeah.
You don't pay a price. Okay. But yeah, no, I thought that was a good point to bring up.
That guy cracked me up, though, the fucking frat guy. Oh, my God. I wanted to punch him in the face.
When Chomsky started arguing with him, too, he started, like, rolling his eyes and like, looking around and stuff, too.
Yes.
It was great.
Oh, he was the worst.
He's like, why is he answering me? Why didn't he just give up?
I thought I got him. I thought it was a solid burn.
That was good.
There was also the debate with this Dutch politician who sucked. I hated him.
That guy was trash.
Yeah. At one point he says, anarchy is a boy's dream. And it's just like, all right, dude.
Oh, yeah. It can be a girl's dream or a non-binary dream, too.
Yeah. Well, let's not gender this dream.
Yeah. So what did you take from that exchange or anything, from that debate with that guy? Anything?
I think it really comes down to, I really think that guy was taking maybe him too literally. Like he was taking Chomsky literally, saying like, there's no conspiracy. Sorry, I'm doing a terrible Dutch accent. It's probably
sorry
offensive.
to our Dutch listeners.
If we have any of those, sorry.
Yeah, most of you are way cooler than this guy. Pretty much every one of you would have been cooler than this guy.
This guy super sucked. But yeah, he was just like, I think he was taking the conspiracy thing too literally. Like, no, there's no cabal, and like, basically just like, this isn't realistic,
Yeah. He was easily dismissed. So I thought so easily dismissed, like so easily torn apart that he had to be like, Chomsky is the intellectual bully. He's building up a straw man of me. And it's like, nah, dude, that's just what you said. Like,
there was another guy. I think this was actually a different, there's so many just talking heads in this movie. So it was hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
At one point, he's debating with Noam and saying, we're on first term basis, by the way.
Yeah. And Noam hang out.
We text. And they're talking about, I guess, the Iran-Contra, I think. And he's saying, like, you're not being fair. Like, they keep talking over each other. And he eventually says something to the effect of, these things didn't happen within the context. Like, he's basically saying, like, you're not telling everything.
Sibley or somebody. That's just some asshole.
Yeah. And it's just like, what possible context could explain, like, why we're murdering people? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And he was talking about fucking, not directly necessarily, but like the whole Operation Condor style domination of the Western Hemisphere thing. That's what he was talking about. And he's just like, oh no, that never happened. And he's just like, you're giving a hog.
Completely dismissed him.
Yeah. And he just, resorted to talk over, and you could tell based on the clip, that was later in the interview, because Chomsky had had a fuck enough and was just like, no, I didn't interrupt you. Like he was just like, fuck you, I'm talking.
There were so many times where he had to be like, hey, can I finish the sentence? Can I finish the sentence? Oh, it was upsetting. My other least favorite debater was the Southern sounding guy. I'm going to make a face.
No. He's not Southern at all. He's transatlantic. But go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought he was Southern. What was his name?
William F. Buckley Jr.
That guy sucked.
That guy is a piece of shit. Like a 100%, a horrid little man. Fuck him.
What did he do? I forgot.
So William F. Buckley is this very conservative, like old school conservative style guy. He ran this show called The Firing Line, which is what we saw him in that clip on. From like maybe the late 60s, early 70s or something to like the mid 90s or something. This was a long running show.
Yeah.
And it was in that format. If he would just bring people on and talk to them either in a kind of congenial way if they're more conservative or in like this asshole badgery way. If
God, he was liberal. So mean.
And he would just do the thing where he would say, oh, well, you say that, yes, everyone bears the blame for whatever, but then you want to, he has this horrible grating.
He makes his mouth like, like I'm showing, and this is not good for the podcast, but he has a weird mouth, is the point.
He's got very bucked teeth.
It goes with Buckley.
Yeah. He's just a wretched little thing.
He is.
In the interview, he said, like, yeah, don't lose your temper with me or I'll fucking punch you, is what he tells Chomsky.
Insane. That guy fucking sucked.
No, he's a piece of shit. Let me bring something up for you because you'll hate this.
Okay, yeah, gimme.
There's this interview he does with, it's like a debate between him and Gore Vidal, who's like kind of a leftist or liberal sort of figure. Buckley is debating this guy and he just gets pissed at him because Vidal calls him a crypto-Nazi.
Ooh.
He gets pissed at getting called a crypto-Nazi and he says, listen, and then he slurs at the guy, he's using a slur for gay people. Great start. Says, stop calling me a crypto-Nazi or I'll sock you in your goddamn face and you'll stay plastered.
What the fuck?
So, like, this whole thing about, like, oh, I'll punch you in the face, Noam Chomsky, is not just, like, an isolated incident. That's just, like, what he does when he's pissed at people.
This guy would love to punch someone in the face. I'd love to punch him in the face, honestly.
Yeah, no, he's got to totally punch him in the face. And, like,
he really does.
I would be like, fucking bring it, bitch. Like, he's not, like, physically intimidating. Anyway.
No, he's not. He looks like I would steal his lunch money.
Derailing a little bit, but...
Yeah, that guy sucked. Let's get to our next section, which, wow, I was not expecting a Holocaust denier story to show up in this documentary, but it did.
That guy was fucked up.
That guy was super fucked up.
That dude they were talking, that guy messed up. And, okay, boil it down, Chomsky wrote a defense of free speech, basically.
Mm-hmm. Which, actually, he did this recently. I think it was, like, last year. That Harper's letter?
He was in that shit too,
Yeah, people gave him a lot of shit for that.
And I mean, it just seems like the dude is the classic, like, 100% free speech kind of guy.
I think that's really the long and short of it. Is
he breaks it down. Like, he talks to that student and he just kind of says, like, okay, you are either 100% free speech for everybody, Nazis, Stalinists, whoever the fuck, or you're not, or you want any sort of limitation on that, which makes you
not for free speech. It's one of the very few things there is a distinct binary for. Like, and he uses this phrase a few times, I think, is like, he's going to defend their right to freedom of speech, but you can do that without endorsing the views. Like,
do you kind of subscribe to that? Do you think that you're more or less?
I don't know. I've been thinking about this. There's a storyline on the latest season of Shrill where she covers... she's like a journalist and she like covers this like white supremacy group, basically like a separatist group outside of Portland. And she gets like called racist for it. And the thing is, she gave them a platform. And I think that's kind of where I stand. Like, yeah, you can fucking say it. That doesn't mean I have to like it. That doesn't mean I have to publish it. That doesn't mean I have to give it any sort of attention or monetary value or anything. Like, you can fucking say it in your basement. You can go to your basement and say racial slurs if you want to. And you can say it in public if you want to, but people have a right to respond however the fuck they want to also. That is also free speech.
Well, as far as that example goes, like, you're kind of, I don't know, people have the right to be like, you're an asshole. If you do a story on some white supremacist group and you're just like, hey, look at these guys, aren't they weird? You know,
Yeah.
instead of saying, hey, look at these guys, aren't they pieces of shit? Like, you know, people should be able to be like, you should have condemned them or something, you know.
Yeah, I think she did in the story. I mean, like, it was a TV show, so I didn't read the story. But yeah, I to me, I think there's a difference between saying like, yeah, you can say whatever the fuck you want, and saying like, yeah, I can also respond however the fuck I want.
Yeah, people should totally be able to condemn your
There's
views.
Consequences.
Now, I would also argue that since I do kind of want to democratize things, right? You know, we want to put the people in charge. If the people decide you can't say that, then I mean, the people decided you can't say that.
That's true. Yeah. If everyone's, if we're in a true democracy and everyone votes like, nope, can no longer say that thing, like, sure.
Or if you do, we can respond by punishing you. Like, I don't know, maybe. I mean, then there's nuances. Like, you can't be like, yeah, we all decide that you can't, you know, criticize the government. Okay. But
that one's a bad one. Let's not do that.
So maybe there's not that easily figured out. But Chomsky's very absolutist about it. And he just says like, free speech or nothing. Free speech or bust.
Yeah. Hey, did we ever say what the controversy was in this one? I don't think we did.
No. The controversy was that this guy wrote this book that was like, oh, maybe the Holocaust didn't happen. Maybe there weren't like these gas chambers and all that. It was just Holocaust denialism bullshit.
Yeah, it sucked. This was fucked up. He wrote...
Yeah.
Someone asked him, hey, will you write an article about free speech? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he did. And then the book was, this guy was like, I'm going to put this at the beginning of my book.
As my foreword, yeah.
As my foreword.
Like, you wrote this foreword to this guy who's a piece of shit. And he's like, I mean, like, that guy is a piece of shit, but like, I did, you know, also I wrote that foreword, but it wasn't like the foreword for the book. Like, it was just a statement.
Oh, that's so annoying. And like, okay, but didn't he say, this is where I got a little lost in the weeds.
Yeah.
Didn't he say that like, well, I didn't want to use that general one, so I rewrote it slightly?
I don't remember the details there. I do remember the thing that, you know, stuck out to me is like, well, he is, you know, going to bat, I guess, is he said that like, yeah, this guy does deserve civil rights.
Yeah.
He wrote some statement that was like, or signed a petition or something that was like, this guy deserves civil rights.
Oh, yeah. He signed that petition with like a whole bunch of other people, but he got in trouble for it.
Yeah. And it's just like, okay, I guess I agree with that. Like, don't just take him out in the street and shoot him.
Yeah, don't kill him, I guess. But
like,
don't buy his book either.
Yeah.
Don't publish his book. I mean, publishing has been fucked for a while now. But like, yeah, you see all this rash of like ex-cops getting deals and shit like that. All the Trump people getting deals. And it's like, yeah, they have free speech, but like the publisher also could have just said no. Like,
well, I mean, you know, here's the thing. Publish whatever you want. And figure out ways to kind of covertly commit a little arson or like, you know, do fucking something to make people pay. Just mean tweet about them, I guess, in today's world or something. I mean,
burn all their books.
Yeah, just
don't buy them. Just
do
go
something within the legal bounds, I guess. But like, fucking make them pay for doing things that you don't like.
Okay, next. Basically, we get to this point where it's like, all right, man. You've told us about how this whole system is fucked. Seems pretty bad. Now what?
Yeah.
You get this lady. I really related to her. She's like, I'm just a mom and I just feel overwhelmed by the world. And like, I don't know what to do. I'm just like, oh man, I feel you. And he gives kind of some tips, basically. One of the tips I think is kind of the idea of maybe taking another look at our history, which that's a good one. We try to do that here. Mm-hmm. Taking down the great man view of history and also kind of deconstructing like the propaganda of the United States, like in our history. Like he talks about like, hey, like this country's founded on genocide. And we basically just like didn't acknowledge that for 200 years. So like that'd be a good start.
Yeah. Sure.
So that's kind of the first point. It's like, hey, take a look at history.
Yeah.
The second point I would say he calls it intellectual self-defense, which is a cool term.
A black belt in intellectual self-defense.
That's the only kind of self-defense I can do. I am very physically weak.
The great man view is great in terms of he talks about, oh yeah, there's some leaders and stuff and people might say, oh, Noam Chomsky, whatever. Like, okay, you know, people said, oh, you know, here comes along Martin Luther King. So then the civil rights happened because this one guy had this great idea. And it's something we saw in Engels' Socialism, Scientific and Utopian, as he talks about like, hey, if the great man theory of history is true, basically, then we were sitting, all sitting around being assholes until somebody came up and be like, hey, what if we do this? Like that's obviously not what it was. Like processes happen. And that's kind of what Chomsky is saying in this, kind of Marxian for him analysis of it is social forces happen. And so many people had to do things to where there could be a Martin Luther King figure.
I loved when he said that. Like, yeah, the reason these names is because other people stood with them. Like, that's cool.
And I think the alternative media thing kind of is sort of happening organically in our world with Twitter, Reddit. Mm-hmm. People are able to follow shittier versions of the mainstream media, but also better versions of it. Like,
I think it's better in some ways because you can find what you're looking for. Just find a podcast that you agree with or whatever.
Like us.
Us. But it's also shittier because at the end of the day, these are all still controlled by big tech. And like, that's bad. Like you see it now, the internet is like cracking down even further on not safe for work content. Which always comes for queer people. Like, just being queer is apparently very sexy and dangerous, which, I'm not going to lie, it is. But, like, when that happens, they get taken off platforms, too. Like, that happened with Tumblr a while back, and that was a big deal. And now Twitter's going to kind of do the same thing, it looks like. Yeah. So at the end of the day, like, yeah, you get this kind of, quote unquote free media and like you're getting the news on the ground. And that's great. And that has led us to things like, the Black Lives Matter movement. Like we have fucking video now. We can see these things. But you're still relying on big corporations to decide what does get censored. And like that can go hard the other way too. Of like, yeah, I don't want to see fucking 8chan out here. But like.
Yeah, that's true. Better, I guess, for it to be in the hands of the people.
Yeah.
It goes up the chain and it's in the hands of a corporation again.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, those things want to make money. And like, there's this fallacy of like, oh, you can just go to another platform. But it's like, eventually, like, especially with Apple, their standards for like, you can't have anything not safe for work on there are so extreme that like, eventually, that's just not going to be an option. Like they distribute everything. Mm-hmm. Oh, I have just kind of an aside.
Yeah.
I really liked when that one lady at the mic was like, when can we feel pride again in the United States? And he was just like, never.
I really felt for her. She meant that question earnestly. And
she did.
He was just like, if you mean the government, no.
He said it. He said states are violent structures. And I have a hand clap emoji in my notes.
You're an anarchist.
Speaking of which, that's our next topic here.
Yeah.
So he called himself a libertarian anarchist?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's hard for me because I still naturally recoil at libertarian as a term.
Right. Yeah, that makes you think of fedoras and neckbeards. But what he means is this kind of, he explicitly says anarcho-syndicalism. But he's kind of meaning kind of anarcho-communism or anarchist socialism sort of stripe. That whole area.
Yeah, and in the documentary, some people ask, like, you can tell this guy thought he totally fucking got him because he's like, oh, what'd you do besides capitalism? And someone else asked, like, are there any sustained examples of anarchism? And it's like, where have I fucking heard that before? Spain
during the Spanish Civil War.
Our best friends! God, can you just go ahead and start researching that, bud?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. It's summer. You don't have an excuse. Get to work. He talks about the Israeli kibbutzim. I hadn't heard of them.
Yeah, the kibbutzim. Those are kind of like these, I mean, they're communes. They're, communal kind of agricultural communities. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. Chomsky, I think in the documentary, describes himself as having been brought up in kind of this socialist Zionist community.
Yeah, that was interesting.
In further reading, I was looking at this because I was like, well, okay, today when I'm just like, fuck Zionism, right? And he says, well, that was a very different thing then, and now it's kind of considered like anti-Zionism, what I was then.
Interesting.
Because he was saying like that was, his idea of that, he liked these kibbutzim. He liked the kind of cooperation between them and the Arab population there. He wanted to build kind of a two-state, which I think now maybe we're at the one-state solution really, of just like make the whole thing a democratic socialist sort of state.
That'd be great.
There shouldn't be any ethno-states, but...
No, that'd be bad.
I mean, like, what other state is just like, we're a state for, like, white people?
Yeah, no one does that. I mean, we do it secretly, but, like...
Sure. But he was kind of saying, we were, like, working with, like, in collaboration with people. Like, that's what we believed in, was being, like, pro-Arab and, like, all this sort of stuff. And so I guess that's why he says, like, it's basically anti-Zionist there. It's, like, trying to get everyone included in this kind of democratic project. That's what he...
Yeah.
was on board with the kibbutzim.
What I liked about his anarchist views, which I think is what I like about communism in general, is somebody asks kind of the nature of man question. It's like classic question.
Yeah.
And his answer was really good because he said, it depends, yes, on people's human nature changing over time, but it will also create it. And I love that. That's really cool.
What do you mean?
I mean, like, it'll create it, like it will encourage that to change. Like, as this is happening, more people will say like, oh, I don't like have to hoard my shit because I'm gonna have enough to survive. Like, it's like a feedback loop kind of thing of like people going into it for Gen 1 will realize that over time, and then their kids will be like, that's just the way it is. Everyone has things and it's nice.
Yeah, that's our classic the boot is wet theory.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we're going to change the conditions, change the material conditions, and you'll get different people.
T-shirts, imperialism sucks, and then just a picture of a wet boot with no explanation.
No, just no other text at all.
Yes, I'll get on designing those right away.
But yeah, I mean, like, and there were inklings of this in the Soviet Union. They had this concept of the new Soviet man, or to translate it more accurately in the 21st century, the new Soviet person, is that someone would be, the conditions would be such under the workers' state that people would be breaking free of their old greed, of their old, competitiveness, cutthroatedness, selfishness, whatever you want to phrase it as. They would be moving past the old animal survival mode. Yeah. Into this communal mode of self-fulfillment, of helping each other fulfill each other's stuff, and working together to do that, to watch each other's backs rather than to just get your own sort of thing.
All right. Can we talk about how fucking weird this movie was?
Because we put this together for you in a nice,
orderly fashion.
Cognitively ordered. It was pretty well sequential. That's not how it was presented.
Oh my God, no. The production value here was insane. Not like it was top of the line shit. It was very not. It was very kitschy is how I would describe this movie. Is like, yeah, they love a metaphor. Like at the beginning, they literally show a factory, and it's like, get it? It's manufacturing consent.
And they do like a kind of an industrial sound of.
Yeah, it's so stupid. Yeah. And like whenever he's debating the Dutch guy, they have like a boxing scene, and we talked about the surgery scene.
Oh, they
like,
do some of the
love
on
a visual
the
metaphor.
Thing. Yeah, they really hammer it.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, and I'm like, it's interesting. Like I've never seen a documentary quite like it. I'll say that. It's different. But I don't know. Some of them were hit or miss.
I thought sometimes this was not well done. Generally, whenever, and this is just kind of, I think it's me not really understanding or maybe appreciating the documentary genre.
Yeah.
Is that I kind of cringe or don't really like when there's any sort of insertion of the camera or the crew of the filmmakers.
Oh, I don't care about that.
Which, people, it's good. It's like, oh, well, here's the, it's a real, I don't know. It has some sort of angle to it that people like. I don't like it. I want it to be presented as like, a very clean, polished History Channel sort of style of like,
Yeah, that's what I was missing. I think is maybe a narrator, like that. They just didn't have one. It was just like maybe a few points they did.
Yeah, very few
though. It was most of the, I would say 90, maybe 80% of the footage was interviews. It felt like we were just going on his book tour with him.
It was kind of a recording of a tour by him, basically. Yeah, it was like live tapes, the bootleg Chomsky tapes.
Yes, fuck yes. He's selling T-shirts out there.
There was one of them that was particularly kitschy / annoying to me was the one about, we were talking about you want to get elites to your advertising thing, but they were showing this like astronaut falling to Earth.
Yes, the spinning.
Yes.
I had to look away. Like it made me.
It was no good. It didn't do anything. So a few techniques to refine.
I will say, I think what made this suffer a little bit, I talked about the lack of narrator. I think Noam is really cool and smart. I don't think he has a great speaking style. Like, I had to really listen to pay attention. Like, I had to be like, okay. Like, he doesn't have much of a cadence. He kind of just talks.
No, yeah. He's very much an old school professor in that way. It's like, he knows a lot of shit. Mm-hmm. And his, the university that lets him keep studying that shit told him, you have to teach these people. And he's like, oh, fuck.
Fuck.
He's not I don't think he's a teaching professor in like specialty,
It's just very monotone.
And I think that the kind of focus on his public appearances was also a little detrimental. I think I read this that like Chomsky actually had this criticism of like that the New York Times review of this documentary kind of framed it as like that people had this idea that he's somebody to like pay attention to, like this is an awareness film. Hey, go check out Noam Chomsky. And
like a self-aggrandizing thing.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm not leading a movement. Like, don't fucking do that. Like, go do.
Yeah.
And he kind of talks about his call to action, like pay attention to media and like take fucking collective action. But like the documentary, I don't think hammers that home enough.
Yes.
And so you come away with like, who's Noam Chomsky? I like him. Like.
Yeah, I agree. I think again, the interview and speaking like event format just kind of hurt it. Like, I feel like we could have made all these points like, let's just have an extended interview with him.
Oh yeah.
Let's do, narration over photos instead. Like, he could speak to these things. Like, I just don't know why that choice was made. I thought that was weird. Yeah.
Some parts it was cool.
Like, I think that's a good element. I just think it was like way too much of the film. The soundtrack bopped.
The jazz, you like that shit?
Oh, I love that shit. It was so weird.
It was like Seinfeld, man.
It was very Seinfeld. Two more random notes. At one point, they do like a newsreel video of like, what's journalism?
Yes.
And I'm like, is this video for fucking aliens? Like, here's what the news is.
I thought
it
that was
really funny.
Kind of good because it was so like it almost was a little bit alien because it was like, here's what the news is to the like kind of New Deal press, like so long ago. This is the ideal, and it had to be, the ideal kind of conception of what press could be, the fourth estate sort of thing. Yeah.
Final note I have is Noam Chomsky, guys. He's got a monkey named after him.
Noam Chomsky, dumbass, can't talk.
They tried to teach this monkey to talk for 4 years.
I love how the lady gets on there. It's like, we gave him every opportunity.
So
trash talked this chimp.
She was like, absolutely did.
I told this chimp every motherfucking thing I could, and this bitch could not talk.
It's like he just asks for things. He doesn't actually conversate. I'm like, man, that's a mood.
To be fair, that's how they say chimps are, is like they're like humans without any sort of conscience. Like they are just the id distilled.
I was going to say id, yeah.
Yeah, they're just
horny, hungry. That's it.
Right, yeah. They just and they'll, enslave you or whatever. They'll do whatever they need to do to get what they want done.
Damn, chimps.
So
chimps are real fascists.
Yeah, they're not like who we want to study for our human nature.
Yeah. Final thoughts on this. One thing I really liked, they kind of ended on, is they ask him like, hey, this sounds exhausting. how do you do it? You know, basically like, how do you not get burnt out reading all this shit? And he's like, can you afford not to? And I'm like, damn, dude, like,
yeah.
Okay.
I do think it's a very good film in terms of sowing enough like skepticism, sowing enough like, you know, aren't you fucking pissed about this? To get people to say, you know, this is fucked up. What else is fucked up? I shouldn't believe what people are telling me, sort of thing. Getting people to like start taking the steps necessary to eventually get to, because I watched this way before I was like really on the on the true leftist path, you know, like, and it kind of gets you thinking like in terms of systems, in terms of power, in terms of who's trying to get me to do what, that you can kind of start opening your eyes and asking even bigger questions.
Yeah, this kind of fascinates me. At one point, the New York Times guy, this poor guy, we shit on him so much. He says like, well, this right-wing guy agrees with Chomsky. So like, you know, clearly he's crazy. And it's like, they're not wrong. Like there's so many times I look at the right wing and I'm like, you're racist and terrible, but you're not wrong. You're just wrong in the way you're wrong in a specific way, but your general grievances are correct. It's not because they're biased against you. I mean, they are, but like, who cares? It's that the whole system is bad. Like there's always a nugget in there, you know?
Yeah. And Chomsky at some point says this Democratic and Republican Party, they're both like kind of in this whole sort of defense of the kind of neoliberal establishment sort of thing. The guy we're shitting on, by the way, is Carl E. Meyer, editorial writer for the New York Times.
I guess so.
Poor bastard, editorial writer. Like, those guys are just, I mean, like, anybody can get an editorial column in the New York Times now. But he had to be on this documentary. But you remember, I think you were telling me about this, about the QAnon documentary.
Yes, like they're kind of right. They're like, oh, there's a conspiracy. And you're like, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, it's about bloodletting and raping children. You're like, wait, no.
Yeah. Or like, you know, oh, the elites are fucked up. You're damn right. They're completely fucked up. You know, they don't want us to do, you know, they don't want us to find out what they're doing. They want to keep power for them. Yes, of course.
Yes,
100%.
nod. Yes.
They, you know, are sucking adrenochrome or whatever.
And you're like, hold on.
Right.
Almost had me there.
That's the reason that conspiracy theories appeal to people, is they offer the secret explanation of things, and you know, like, I mean, okay, communism kind of does that. I mean, it does in a way, like give you this like lens to view the world through and stuff. It just happens to be true.
On that note, do you have any final thoughts? Do you want to do a star rating?
My star rating is 4 out of 5. It's not, I mean, it's not like, you know, it's not the text for us, of course. Listeners, you're probably like, this was like, I watched this and I got it. Fine.
Yeah.
You know? Or you got a little bit from it. Whatever. I think it's a good recruiting tool. And maybe that's because I watched it long ago and I thought it kind of drove me in my direction. But I think it's good to like expose people to. It's weird.
It's weird.
But like it's kind of like kitschy in a kind of, you know, old school retro kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's older, I think, explains a lot of that. You can be like, look, guys, they were trying some shit. So.
Yeah. And I think it's good to get people questioning and then like looking into things. And then you could, I mean, because if you just sit there and be like, oh yeah, the East Timor thing, they're not fucking lying. That actually happened. You will blow somebody's fucking mind because so many people don't know about that thing.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know about East Timor until like we got drunk and talked about Noam Chomsky. I had never heard of this country.
Yeah. I heard about it initially. You want to know how I first heard about East Timor? Was from a Rainbow Six game that I rented when I was a kid playing on like N64 or something.
Hell yeah.
That's how I first heard about East Timor at all.
Oh my gosh.
Some sort of, you know, some sort of fucking propaganda campaign from the CIA.
Yeah, you were probably shooting some communists.
Yeah, I mean, but that's how I first heard the name of it at all.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think I give it I'm going to say a 3.5.
Yeah.
I love the message. I don't love the delivery. The kitsch stuff I could have dealt with, but I think it's the relying on interviews and speeches. It felt like a fucking press tour.
And honestly, I probably will revise down to 3.5.
Ooh.
Because you're right that the sequence lends itself more to somebody who knows about Noam Chomsky, knows about anarchism, leftism at all. Mm-hmm. A more experienced hand. It's really easy to follow if you know a little bit about it. If you don't know anything, maybe it's harder.
I don't know. I don't think he doesn't really get explicit about that stuff till later.
Yeah.
You know, when they say like, oh, what do you think we should do instead? So I don't feel like he doesn't like make a hard push for leftist stuff. He's just like, hey, this is fucked up. And you're like, yeah, it's pretty fucked up. Like, I don't know. I didn't think it was too hard.
All right. I'm keeping my 4 then.
Okay, keep your 4. That's fine. We can disagree.
I'm a generous grader, as my students will attest. Shout out to all the people doing hard work in student radio, in public radio. All these people doing the interviews with them. Like, I don't know if they're still doing their work or whatever, but like, and the magazines and stuff, everyone seemed to be really like fucking working hard, trying to pump out this shit for the people. Like,
yeah, like that is a thankless job. Like literally, like you're not going to make any money from it.
All right.
Next week, we're doing a listener Q&A.
Hell yeah. Unless you send us the best question ever, we're probably going to get to it in the next Q&A. Because we got a lot built up already.
We do. We have quite the backlog. I got to go through my screenshots and my emails. So,
yes, but patience is a virtue. So, like, send those in. We'll get to them eventually. That's like, you know, we're getting to the eventual ones from before this time.
That's true.
So, send them in.
Just keep sending them. I love it.
Knock and the door will be answered.
We'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, you can find us online. We're on Twitter at teachcommunism. We are on Instagram at teachmecommunism. We are on Gmail, teachmecommunism@gmail.com. If you want to send us one of those beautiful questions, you can do that really anywhere. I try to answer social media questions. If it's an easy enough one that I can just answer, sometimes I will just do that, or I will just refer you to an episode. So like, just message me. It's cool.
If it's complex and it's like, hey, in these early episodes, you didn't Wikipedia link everything. Can you do that? It'll take some time. Like
it will. Yeah. Actually, yeah, we had someone message us like, I'm writing a paper. Can you like give me some sources? And I was like, yeah, sure. Let me bug Grady about this.
And I did it like a chump. So I have like 1/8 of your college degree, whatever you get it in. Just credit me, or if you give a speech, thank me for it.
Yeah, we're chumps. We will dance for you. Anyway, but you have to dance for us by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Please do.
This is a symbiotic relationship.
For at least one of us. I have not read those in maybe 3/4 of like 9 months.
I check them like at least once a week. I'm a monster.
No, I haven't for a long time. So if you guys are talking shit about me on there, that's honestly fine. I don't know.
Okay. Now that we know this info, everyone only compliment me on there because I'm the only one that's going to read it. So
yeah, I'll go on there eventually and be horrified at whatever.
But yeah, leave us a review there. You don't have to be an Apple user to do it. It's great. Rate and review. We also have a YouTube if that's how you want to listen to things, or if you know someone that's the only way they listen to podcasts, send them that way. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/teachmecommunism. For $5 a month, you get access to our notes for every episode. So this episode, you'll get both of our notes on this movie. And at the end of the year, those funds will go to a local mutual aid fund. So yeah. Not lining our pockets.
Yeah, or the local Soviet, whichever happens first.
Yes. If you want to do that, let me know. This has been a long recording sesh, so really I'm ready to go chill.
Well, thanks for watching this documentary with me.
Yeah, it's very good.
Thank you for tuning in. You guys can catch us next week on the next episode of Teach Me Communism, where the class struggle is always in session.
Bye.
Goodbye.